The morning sun filtered through the expensive curtains of the Anderson mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Tors pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, her worn shoes making soft sounds against the polished surface. She had been working for the Anderson family for 3 months now, and every day brought the same routine. Clean the guest rooms, dust the library, vacuum the sitting areas, and try not to disturb the young master of the house. Thomas Anderson was only 24 years old, but he looked much older. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. Dark circles surrounded them like bruises that never healed. He spent most of his days in his bedroom on the second floor, curtains drawn, shutting out the world. Had seen him only a handful of times, usually shuffling to the bathroom or being helped downstairs by his mother for another doctor's appointment. The family was wealthy beyond imagination. Thomas's father, Robert Anderson, owned a chain of successful tech companies across the country. His mother had been a renowned architect before dedicating her life to finding answers for her son's mysterious illness. Money was never an issue for them. They had consulted with specialists from Boston to California, flown in experts from Europe and Asia, and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on tests, treatments, and experimental therapies. Nothing worked. Thomas kept getting worse. Remembered the first time Mrs. Anderson had explained the situation to her. It was her second day of work, and she had accidentally knocked on Thomas's door while cleaning. Mrs. Anderson had pulled her aside, her elegant face lined with worry and exhaustion. "Please be gentle around my son's room," she had said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's very ill. We don't know what's wrong with him, but he needs quiet and rest." Had nodded, her heart filling with sympathy. She had raised 3 children of her own back in her small apartment across town. She knew what it was like to worry about a sick child, though her problems had always been simpler. A fever, a cold, maybe a broken bone. Nothing like whatever was consuming Thomas Anderson from the inside out. Over the weeks, learned more about Thomas's condition from the other staff members. The cook, an older woman named Helen, told her that Thomas had been perfectly healthy until 9 years ago. He had been a star athlete in high school, played varsity basketball, and had been accepted to 3 different Ivy League universities. Then, during his sophomore year of college, everything changed. It started with headaches, terrible, splitting headaches that made him vomit and kept him in bed for days. His parents thought it was stress from his demanding coursework. They took him to the University Health Center where doctors prescribed migraine medication. It didn't help. The headaches got worse and soon other symptoms appeared. Fatigue so severe that he could barely lift his head from the pillow. Joint pain that made his knees and elbows swell. Dizzy spells that sent him crashing to the floor. Strange rashes that appeared on his skin and then vanished without explanation. Thomas dropped out of college and moved back home. His parents immediately took him to their family doctor, who ran blood tests and found nothing unusual. They went to a neurologist who ordered brain scans. Everything looked normal. A rheumatologist checked for autoimmune diseases. The tests came back negative. An infectious disease specialist searched for hidden infections, rare parasites, tropical diseases. Nothing. Year after year, the Anderson family traveled from one medical center to another. Thomas was examined by hundreds of doctors. He underwent every test imaginable. MRI scans, CT scans, PET scans, spinal taps, biopsies, endoscopies. They tested his blood, his urine, his spinal fluid, even his hair and nails. Doctors threw around diagnoses like confetti, only to retract them weeks later when treatments failed. Chronic fatigue syndrome, they said, then fibromyalgia. Perhaps Lyme disease, though the tests were inconclusive. Maybe it was all in his head, some suggested, recommending psychiatrists and antidepressants. Anderson refused to accept that her son's illness was psychological. She could see him wasting away before her eyes. Thomas, who had once been tall and strong and full of life, had become a shadow. He lost weight until his clothes hung off his frame. His muscles atrophied from lack of use. His skin took on a grayish tinge. Some days he couldn't hold a conversation because his mind felt foggy and confused. Other days the pain was so intense that he could only lie in bed and cry. The Anderson family tried everything. Traditional medicine, alternative medicine, experimental treatments. They flew to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, Johns in Maryland, Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. They consulted with doctors in Switzerland and Germany. Thomas swallowed countless pills, endured painful procedures, spent weeks in various hospitals. Nothing made a difference. If anything, he seemed to be deteriorating faster. Watched all of this from the sidelines, her heart breaking for the family. She saw Mrs. Anderson's eyes grow more desperate with each passing week. She heard Mr. Anderson's voice rising in frustration during late-night phone calls with yet another specialist. She saw the staff members shaking their heads sadly, whispering that it was only a matter of time before the poor young man succumbed to whatever mysterious force was destroying his body. On this particular Tuesday morning was assigned to deep clean the second floor. This included Thomas's bedroom, though she had strict instructions to work quietly and quickly. Mrs. Anderson had told her that Thomas had been particularly ill over the weekend and might be sleeping. Gathered her supplies and made her way upstairs, her mind already planning the most efficient cleaning route. She knocked softly on Thomas's door and waited. No answer. She knocked again a little louder, still nothing. Carefully, she turned the handle and pushed the door open just a crack. "Mr. Thomas," she called quietly. "It's the housekeeper. I need to clean your room. Is it okay to come in?" A weak voice answered from somewhere inside. "Yeah, come in, I'm awake." Entered the room and immediately noticed how stuffy it felt. The air was thick and stale, with an odd smell she couldn't quite identify. The curtains were drawn tight, leaving the room in perpetual twilight. She could make out Thomas's form on the bed, propped up slightly against several pillows. "I'll just do a quick clean," said, setting down her supplies. "Won't take long. Would you like me to open a window, get some fresh air in here?" Thomas shrugged weakly. "If you want, doesn't really matter." Crossed to the window and pulled back the heavy curtains, letting sunlight flood the room. Thomas winced at the brightness but didn't complain. She opened the window, and a cool breeze swept in, dispersing some of the stale air. Already the room felt better. She worked efficiently, dusting the furniture, emptying the trash can, organizing the bottles of medication that covered the nightstand. There were dozens of them, prescriptions from different doctors, supplements and vitamins, herbal remedies and experimental drugs. Carefully wiped down each bottle, reading the labels. Some she recognized, others had names she couldn't pronounce. Thomas watched her work, his eyes following her movements. "You're new, aren't you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Been here about 3 months now, Mr. Thomas," replied, straightening his desk. "But I know you don't come out much, so we haven't really met proper." 3 months, Thomas repeated, as if trying to process this information. Time doesn't mean much anymore, days just blur together. His heart squeezed with sympathy. She turned to look at him, really look at him, and was shocked by what she saw. Even in the 3 months she'd been working here, he seemed to have deteriorated. His cheeks were hollow, his collarbones jutting out sharply. His hands, resting on top of the blanket, were thin and trembling. "I'm sorry you're going through this," said quietly. "Your mother says the doctors can't figure out what's wrong." Thomas let out a bitter laugh. 9 years, 9 years of tests and treatments and specialists. Nobody knows anything. My parents have spent a fortune trying to fix me, and I just keep getting worse. He paused, then added softly, "Sometimes I think it would be easier if I just died. At least then it would be over." "Don't say that," said firmly, moving to straighten the books on his shelf. "Don't ever say that. There's always hope. Maybe the next doctor will figure it out." "That's what my mom keeps saying. But I'm tired, so tired of being sick, of being poked and prodded, of taking pills that don't work, of seeing my parents spend everything trying to save me. I'm tired of being a burden." "You're not a burden," insisted. "You're their son. They love you." Thomas didn't respond, closing his eyes and sinking deeper into his pillows. Continued cleaning, working her way around the room. She vacuumed the carpet, wiped down the surfaces, changed the water glass on his nightstand. The room was large, with its own bathroom and a walk-in closet. It was beautifully furnished, but it felt more like a hospital room than a bedroom. Medical equipment sat in the corner, a wheelchair folded against the wall, pill organizers scattered everywhere. As worked, she noticed something odd. The strange smell she had detected when she first entered hadn't gone away completely, even with the window open. It was a musty, chemical-like odor, faint but persistent. She sniffed the air, trying to locate its source. It seemed stronger near the bed. She glanced at Thomas, who appeared to be dozing. Quietly, she moved around the bed, checking if perhaps something had spilled or if there was mold growing somewhere. The smell seemed to be coming from underneath the bed. Got down on her knees and lifted the dust ruffle to peer underneath. What she saw made her pause. There were items under the bed, lots of them. Boxes, containers, bags. That wasn't unusual in itself. Many people stored things under their beds. But something about the arrangement seemed off. The items were pushed far back, almost hidden, and there were more than she would have expected. The smell was definitely stronger here. Sat back on her heels, thinking, should she pull everything out to clean properly? But if Thomas had deliberately hidden things under there, maybe she shouldn't disturb them. Then again, if something was causing that smell, it might need to be cleaned or thrown away. She decided to ask. "Mr. Thomas," she said softly. He stirred but didn't open his eyes. "Mr. Thomas, you got a lot of stuff stored under your bed. Should I pull it out to clean under there properly?" His eyes snapped open, suddenly alert. "No," he said quickly, too quickly. "No, don't worry about under the bed, it's fine." His reaction struck as strange, but she nodded. "Okay, if you're sure, but there's a funny smell in here coming from that direction. Might be something old or spoiled." "It's fine," Thomas repeated, his voice tight. "Just leave it." Stood up, brushing off her knees. Thomas had turned his face away from her, staring at the wall. The easy conversation from earlier had vanished. Something about mentioning the items under the bed had changed his demeanor completely. He seemed anxious now, almost frightened. She finished her cleaning in silence, gathering her supplies. Before leaving, she glanced back at Thomas, who remained facing the wall, his body tense. Something felt wrong but couldn't put her finger on what it was. She left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Throughout the rest of the day, couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something important. The way Thomas had reacted when she mentioned cleaning under the bed, the fear in his voice, his sudden change in mood. And that smell. What was causing it? Why was it coming from under his bed? Why didn't he want her to look there? Her curiosity gnawed at her as she cleaned the other rooms. She told herself it was none of her business, that she should focus on her work and leave the Anderson family's private matters alone. But another part of her, the mother part, couldn't stop worrying. What if there was something under that bed that was making Thomas sick? What if whatever was causing that smell was actually poisoning him? By the time her shift ended, had made a decision. Tomorrow, when she came back, she would find a way to look under that bed properly. If Thomas or his parents got angry with her, so be it. She would rather lose her job than ignore what might be an important clue to solving this terrible mystery. 9 years was too long for someone so young to suffer without answers. If there was even the slightest chance that something under that bed was connected to his illness, she had to investigate. Left the Anderson mansion that evening with her mind racing, already planning how she would approach the situation the next day. She didn't know it yet, but her decision to look under Thomas's barely slept that night. She lay in her small bed in her modest apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Thomas Anderson and that strange smell in his room. Her daughter, who lived with her and worked as a nurse at the local hospital, had come home late from her shift and noticed her mother was still awake. "Mama, what's wrong?" asked, sitting on the edge of bed. "You look worried." Hesitated, then told her daughter everything. About Thomas, about his 9 years of mysterious illness, about the smell coming from under his bed and his strange reaction when she mentioned cleaning there. Listened carefully, her nursing instincts kicking in. "That is strange," she said thoughtfully. "You know, in the hospital, we see cases sometimes where people get sick from environmental factors, mold, chemicals, toxins in their living space. Did the family ever check his room for stuff like that?" "I don't know," admitted. "Mrs. Anderson said they've done every test imaginable, seen every kind of doctor, but maybe they never thought to look at what's actually in his room." "You should look under that bed tomorrow," said firmly. "If something there is making him sick and you don't check, you'll never forgive yourself. Trust your instincts, Mama. They're usually right." Armed with her daughter's encouragement, arrived at the Anderson mansion the next morning determined to investigate. She went about her usual duties, waiting for the right moment. Mrs. Anderson left mid-morning for a hair appointment. Mr. Anderson was at his office downtown. The cook was busy preparing lunch in the kitchen. Most of the staff was occupied with their own tasks. It was the perfect time. Made her way upstairs with her cleaning supplies. She knocked on Thomas's door, her heart beating faster than usual. When he called for her to enter, she pushed the door open and found him in the same position as yesterday, lying in bed, looking exhausted. "Good morning, Mr. Thomas," said, trying to keep her voice steady. "How are you feeling today?" "Same as always," he muttered. "Maybe worse, had a terrible night. The pain was really bad." His resolve strengthened. If there was any chance that something in this room was causing his suffering, she had to find it. She began her cleaning routine, working her way gradually toward the bed. Thomas seemed more out of it today, his eyes glazed and unfocused. He had probably taken strong pain medication. "Mr. Thomas," said casually as she dusted his dresser, "I was thinking about what you said yesterday about being tired of doctors and tests. You know, my daughter, she's a nurse, and she told me something interesting last night. Sometimes people get sick from things in their environment, things around them that they don't even realize are harmful. Mold, chemicals, stuff like that. Thomas didn't respond, his eyes half closed. Continued, she said in hospitals they always check the patient's living environment as part of diagnosis. Has anyone ever checked your room, like really checked it, for mold or toxins or anything like that? Thomas stirred slightly. I don't know, maybe they've checked everything else. His words were slurred, clearly heavily medicated. Moved closer to the bed, her heart pounding. Mr. Thomas, I really think I should clean under your bed properly today. That smell is still there, and it might be something that needs to be removed. Something that could be making you feel worse. No, Thomas said, but his voice was weak, lacking yesterday's firmness. Just leave it alone. Why? Asked gently, sitting in the chair beside his bed. What's under there that you don't want me to see? Thomas turned his head to look at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes. Not just illness, not just pain. It was shame. Deep, overwhelming shame. Please, he whispered. Please don't look, you won't understand. Try me, said softly. I've raised 3 kids, Mr. Thomas. I've seen a lot in my life, and right now I'm worried about you. I think maybe there's something under that bed that's connected to why you're sick. And if there is, don't you want to know? Don't you want to finally get better after all these years? Tears began rolling down Thomas's hollow cheeks. You don't understand. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, urged. Help me understand. Thomas closed his eyes, more tears leaking out. His body shook with silent sobs. Reached out and gently took his thin hand in hers, the way she would with one of her own children. They sat like that for several minutes, the only sound in the room being Thomas's quiet crying. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm so ashamed. Of what, honey? Asked. Of what I've done, of what I've been doing for years. He opened his eyes and looked at her. If I tell you, you'll tell my parents, and they'll hate me. After everything they've done for me, all the money they've spent, all the worry, they'll hate me when they find out the truth. The truth about what? Pressed gently. Thomas took a shuddering breath. The truth about why I'm really sick. His heart began racing. You know why you're sick? I've always known, Thomas admitted, fresh tears flowing. From the very beginning, but I couldn't stop. I tried to stop so many times, but I couldn't. And it just got worse and worse, and the doctors couldn't figure it out because they didn't know. Nobody knew except me. Felt a chill run down her spine. What's under your bed, Thomas? He didn't answer, just continued crying, made a decision. She stood up and walked around to the side of the bed. Thomas didn't try to stop her this time. He just turned his face away, covering his eyes with his hands. Got down on her knees and lifted the dust ruffle. The smell hit her immediately, stronger now that she was closer. She pulled out the first box she could reach. It was a shoebox, and it was heavy. She opened it, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside were dozens of small bottles and containers. Most of them were empty or nearly empty. Picked one up and read the label. It was a bottle of cough syrup, the kind that contained powerful medications. She picked up another. Diet pills, another. Laxatives, pain medication, sleep aids, antihistamines, stimulants. Each container was from a different brand, purchased from different stores. With trembling hands, reached under the bed and pulled out another box. More medications, then another box, and another, and another. She pulled out plastic bags filled with empty blister packs of pills. Bottles that had once contained prescription medications, now empty. Energy drinks by the dozen. Herbal supplements promising weight loss, muscle gain, enhanced focus. Caffeine pills, diet aids, metabolism boosters. The pile grew and grew as pulled everything out from under the bed. There were shopping bags from pharmacies all over the city, some dating back years based on the faded receipts inside. Notebooks filled with handwritten logs of what he had taken and when, internet printouts about different medications and their effects. There had to be hundreds, maybe thousands of empty containers and packages. This wasn't just a few items hidden away. This was years and years of systematic abuse. Sat back on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of Thomas's secret. She looked up at him, still lying on the bed with his hands covering his face. Finally, she understood. All those mysterious symptoms, the headaches, the fatigue, the joint pain, the rashes, the mental fog, the deterioration, they weren't caused by some rare disease. They were caused by drug abuse. Massive, prolonged drug abuse. Thomas had been poisoning himself for 9 years. Oh, Thomas, said, her voice filled with sadness rather than judgment. Oh, honey, what have you done to yourself? Thomas sobbed harder, his whole body shaking. I couldn't stop, he choked out. I tried so many times, but I couldn't. His mind raced. She needed to understand the full picture. When did this start? She asked gently. Thomas struggled to compose himself enough to speak. Sophomore year of college, I was stressed about my classes. A friend gave me some pills to help me study, said they'd help me focus. They did. They made everything easier, so I started taking them more often. Then I couldn't sleep because of the study pills, so I started taking sleeping pills. Then I'd wake up groggy, so I'd take more stimulants. Then my appetite was gone, so I'd take other things. It just spiraled. He paused, catching his breath. At first, it was just regular doses, just what the labels said. But then I needed more to feel the same effect, so I started taking more and more. I was taking dozens of pills a day, buying them from different stores so nobody would notice. I'd go to pharmacies all over the city, buying maximum amounts of everything I could get without a prescription. Listened, horrified, but trying not to show it. And then you got sick. Yeah, Thomas whispered. The headaches started, they were awful. I thought maybe if I took more pain medication, they'd go away, but they just got worse. Then the other symptoms started. The fatigue, the pain everywhere, the dizziness. I knew it was probably from all the pills I was taking, but by then I was addicted. I couldn't stop. Every time I tried to stop, the withdrawal was terrible, worse than the sickness, so I'd start again. And you let the doctors run all those tests, said slowly, understanding dawning. You let your parents spend all that money, take you to all those specialists, knowing the whole time what was really wrong. I wanted to tell them, Thomas said desperately. So many times I wanted to tell them, but I was ashamed, and I was scared. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to admit the truth. How could I tell them that I'd been lying for 9 years, that all their money, all their worry, all those doctors and tests and treatments, it was all for nothing, that I did this to myself? Thomas sat up slightly, looking at with desperate eyes. Do you know how many times I watched my mother cry? How many times I heard my father on the phone with another specialist, begging them to see me to find out what was wrong? They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. They've restructured their whole lives around my illness. My mom gave up her career. My dad works himself to death to pay for all the treatments. And it was all my fault, all of it. How could I tell them that? Felt tears in her own eyes now. This wasn't a simple case of drug abuse. This was a tragedy that had compounded over years, a secret that had grown so large that it had become impossible for Thomas to escape from it. He was trapped, poisoning himself while pretending to be the victim of a mysterious disease, unable to break free from the addiction or confess the truth. The doctors never found out because they were looking for disease, said, the pieces falling into place. They were looking for infections, autoimmune disorders, cancer. They never tested for chronic drug overdose because you're not a typical drug abuser. You're a wealthy young man from a good family. Nobody suspected. I was careful, Thomas admitted. I never took so much at once that it would show up as an acute overdose. But the cumulative effect, taking multiple medications every single day for years, it was destroying my body from the inside. My liver is damaged. My kidneys aren't working properly. My nervous system is shot. I know all this. I've read about it. I know what I'm doing to myself. But I still can't stop. Looked around at the mountain of empty containers surrounding them. How much are you taking now? Thomas's voice dropped to barely a whisper. More than before, the tolerance builds up. What used to take 5 pills now takes 20. Some days I take 50, 60 different pills and capsules. I have to wait until everyone's asleep, then I sneak to the bathroom and take them. Or I order things online and hide them. I've gotten very good at hiding. Thomas, this is killing you, said urgently. Surely you know that. Yes, he said simply. I know, part of me wants to die. Then at least this would all be over. My parents could stop worrying. They could move on with their lives. That's the drugs talking, said firmly. That's not you. The real you, the person under all this, he doesn't want to die. He's just trapped and scared and doesn't know how to get out. Thomas looked at her with hollow eyes. What am I supposed to do now? You know my secret. Are you going to tell my parents? Thought about this? Her first instinct was yes, of course, his parents needed to know immediately. But she could see how fragile Thomas was. If she just went downstairs and told the Andersons everything without any preparation, it could shatter the family. More importantly, it could push Thomas over the edge. He was clearly struggling with severe depression alongside his addiction. This needed to be handled carefully. I think we need to tell them, said slowly. But we need to do it the right way. They need to understand that you're not a bad person. You're a sick person who needs help. Real help, not more tests and treatments for diseases you don't have. You need addiction treatment, psychological help, medical support for the damage the drugs have caused. Thomas shook his head frantically. They'll hate me. After everything they've done, all the money they've spent, they'll hate me for lying to them. They won't hate you, said with certainty. They'll be shocked and hurt and angry, yes, but they won't hate you. You're their son. They love you. That's why they've spent 9 years doing everything possible to help you. That love doesn't just disappear. You don't know that, Thomas said bitterly. I'm a mother, replied. I know exactly that. There's nothing my children could do that would make me stop loving them. Nothing. Your parents feel the same way. They've proven it by standing by you all these years. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Finally, he asked, What do? I sat on the floor of Thomas's bedroom, surrounded by years of hidden evidence, and thought carefully about her answer. This young man had been suffering alone for so long, trapped in a cycle of addiction and shame that had stolen nearly a decade of his life. She needed to help him, but she also knew that simply exposing his secret without a plan could make things worse instead of better. First, said, standing up and moving to sit on the chair beside his bed again, we need to make sure you're safe. Right now, today, can you tell me honestly how much you've taken in the last 24 hours? Thomas looked away, ashamed. A lot, more than usual. I was in so much pain yesterday, and I was anxious about you cleaning my room. I probably took 70 or 80 pills, maybe more. I lose count sometimes. His eyes widened in alarm. 70 or 80? Thomas, that's extremely dangerous. You could overdose. You could die. I've been taking amounts like this for years, Thomas said wearily. My body is used to it now. If I tried to stop suddenly, the withdrawal would probably kill me anyway. Realized he was right about one thing. Someone who had been abusing multiple medications at high doses for 9 years couldn't just stop cold. The withdrawal could indeed be fatal. He needed medical supervision to safely detox. But how could they get him that help without first telling his parents the truth? Okay, said, thinking out loud. Here's what I think we should do. Today is Wednesday. Your parents are both busy with their work today, right? Thomas nodded weakly. Good, that gives us time to prepare. I'm going to call my daughter. She's a nurse, and she has experience with patients dealing with addiction. She can help us figure out the best way to approach this medically. Then, together, the three of us will plan how to tell your parents in a way that gives them all the information they need while also making sure you get the right kind of help. You're not going to tell them right now? Thomas asked, surprised. I could, said honestly, but I think it would be better to have a plan first, to be able to tell them not just what's wrong, but what we can do about it. They've been searching for answers for 9 years. When we give them those answers, we should also give them hope that this can be fixed. Thomas's eyes filled with tears again. Can it be fixed? After 9 years of doing this to myself, can I actually get better? I don't know, admitted. But I do know that people recover from drug addiction all the time. It's hard and it takes time, but it's possible. And now that we know what's really wrong, you can get the right treatment. The real treatment you've needed all along. Pulled out her cell phone and called her daughter. When answered, explained the situation quickly and quietly, mindful that other staff members might be nearby. Listened without interrupting, her nursing training helping her stay calm and focused. Mama, that's very serious, said once finished. Chronic abuse at those doses for that length of time, he's lucky to be alive. His organs must be severely damaged. Can you come here? Asked. I know you worked a long shift last night, but this is important. This boy needs help, and I don't know enough about medicine to know what to do next. I'll be there in an hour, promised. Don't let him take anything else in the meantime, and make sure he drinks water. He's probably severely dehydrated. After hanging up, turned back to Thomas. My daughter is coming. While we wait for her, I want you to rest. No more pills, Thomas, I mean it. Whatever you're feeling right now, whatever discomfort, you need to fight through it for the next few hours. Can you do that? Thomas nodded, though he looked terrified. I'll try, but you don't understand. The need for them, it's so strong. It's not just physical, it's mental. My brain screams at me to take them. Every minute I don't take something feels like an eternity. I know, honey, said gently. That's what addiction does, but you've been strong enough to survive 9 years of this illness, even if you're the one who caused it. You can be strong enough to wait a few hours for help. Spent the next hour sitting with Thomas, talking to him, trying to keep him distracted. She asked him about his life before the addiction started, about his interests and dreams. Slowly, piece by piece, a picture emerged of who Thomas Anderson had been before drugs took over his life. He had been passionate about architecture like his mother. He loved drawing and designing buildings, imagining structures that could change skylines. He had been good at basketball, enjoying the teamwork and physical challenge. He had friends, a girlfriend, a full life ahead of him. Then the pressure of college, the desire to excel, the availability of pills that promised to make everything easier, and it all fell apart. "I was so stupid," Thomas said, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought I could control it. I thought I was smarter than addiction. I thought it was something that happened to other people, not to someone like me." "Addiction doesn't discriminate," said. "It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, smart or not, good person or bad. It just takes hold and doesn't let go." When arrived, she came upstairs quietly, not wanting to alert the other staff or Mrs. Anderson, who had returned from her hair appointment. Introduced her to Thomas, and immediately went into professional mode. She checked his vital signs as best she could without proper equipment, looked at his skin and eyes, asked him questions about his symptoms. "Your heart rate is elevated," said, concern in her voice. "Your blood pressure is high. You're showing signs of liver damage, kidney stress, and neurological problems. Thomas, you need to be in a hospital, now." "No," Thomas said immediately. "I can't go to a hospital. They'll ask questions. Everyone will find out." "Everyone is going to find out anyway," said gently but firmly. "The question is whether we do this in a controlled way that gives you the best chance of recovery, or whether we wait until your body gives out and you end up in the ER with an emergency. Which would you prefer?" Thomas was quiet, processing this. Continued, "Listen to me. I work in a hospital. I see overdose cases regularly. What you've been doing, taking multiple medications at high doses for years, you're in danger. Not theoretical danger. Real, immediate danger. Your organs are failing. You need medical intervention, and you need it soon." "But if I go to the hospital, my parents will find out," Thomas said weakly. "Your parents are going to find out today, no matter what," interjected. "We've already decided that. The question is how we tell them and what plan we have in place when we do." Pulled out her phone and started making notes. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We need to tell your parents as soon as possible. But when we do, we should have concrete steps already laid out. I know some excellent addiction specialists and treatment centers. Let me make some calls and find out what programs are available for someone in your situation." Over the next hour, while stayed with Thomas, stepped out to make phone calls. She contacted colleagues, called treatment centers, gathered information about medical detox programs and rehabilitation facilities that specialized in prescription drug addiction. When she came back, she had a folder full of information. "I found 3 excellent programs," told them. "All of them have experience with cases like yours, Thomas. They have medical staff who can supervise your detox safely, therapists who specialize in addiction, and comprehensive treatment programs. One of them even has a program specifically for young adults. I spoke with an intake coordinator who said they could admit you as early as tomorrow if your parents agree." Thomas listened, his face a mixture of hope and terror. "Tomorrow? That's so soon." "The sooner the better," said honestly. "Every day you continue like this is another day of damage to your body. You've been lucky so far, but that luck could run out at any moment." Checked her watch. It was almost 4 in the afternoon. "Mr. Anderson usually comes home around 6, she said. "Mrs. Anderson is downstairs right now. We should tell them soon, before dinner, while we're all clear-headed and have time to talk." "I don't think I can do this," Thomas said, panic rising in his voice. "I can't face them. I can't tell them what I've done." "You don't have to tell them alone," assured him. "And I will be there, will help explain, and will show them that there's a path forward, that this isn't the end but a beginning." "But what if they hate me?" Thomas asked, tears streaming down his face again. "What if they're so disgusted by what I've done that they can't forgive me?" Sat on the other side of Thomas's bed, taking his hand. "From what I understand, your parents have spent 9 years desperately searching for answers to help you. They've spent enormous amounts of money, traveled all over the country, consulted with hundreds of doctors. Does that sound like parents who would give up on their son just because he's made mistakes?" "But these aren't just mistakes," Thomas sobbed. "I lied to them. For 9 years, I let them think I had some mysterious disease. I let them spend their money and their time and their emotional energy on something that was my own fault all along." "You didn't do this maliciously," said firmly. "You didn't get addicted to drugs to hurt your parents. You got addicted because you were a young person under pressure who made a bad choice, and then that choice spiraled into something you couldn't control. That's what addiction is. It's a disease too, just a different kind than what your parents thought you had. Thomas wiped his eyes. Do you really think they might understand? I think they deserve the chance to try, said, and I think you deserve the chance to finally get real help. After more discussion and encouragement, Thomas finally agreed. They would tell his parents that evening, would stay for support and to provide the medical perspective, would be there as the one who discovered the truth, and Thomas would have to find the courage to admit what he had been hiding for so long. At 6:30, after Mr. Anderson arrived home, went downstairs and found both parents in the living room. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. I need to speak with you about something very important, about Thomas. Could you come upstairs to his room, please? My daughter is here too. She's a nurse, and there's something you both need to know. Anderson's face went pale. Is Thomas okay? Has something happened? He's okay right now, said carefully. But there's something he needs to tell you, something we've discovered. Please just come upstairs. The walk up the stairs felt like it took forever, and Robert Anderson followed, confusion and worry written all over their faces. When they entered Thomas's room, they were surprised to see there, and even more surprised to see Thomas sitting up in bed, tears already flowing down his face. But what shocked them most was what surrounded the bed, and had arranged all the evidence in plain view. Boxes and boxes of empty medication containers, bags full of pill bottles, years and years of hidden drug abuse, now exposed in the afternoon light. Thomas, whispered, her hand going to her mouth. What is all this? Robert Anderson's face had gone from confusion to understanding to horror in a matter of seconds. As a businessman, he was quick to analyze situations, and the truth was written all over the scene before him. Oh my God, he breathed. Oh my God, Thomas. Thomas couldn't speak. He just sobbed, his thin shoulders shaking, stepped forward knowing she needed to take control of the situation before it spiraled. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, she said calmly, please sit down. This is going to be difficult to hear, but it's important that you listen to everything before you react. Your son has something to tell you, and my daughter is here to provide medical context. What you're about to learn is shocking, but I want you to know before we begin that there is hope. There is a path forward, and your son needs you now more than he has ever needed you before. Sank into a chair, her face white. Robert remained standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Both parents stared at the mountain of evidence at their sick son, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Looked at Thomas. You can do this, she said encouragingly. Tell them the truth, all of it. Thomas took a shuddering breath, wiped his eyes, and began to speak. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you 9 years ago. He paused, gathering courage. I don't have a mysterious disease. I never did. I know exactly what's wrong with me. I've known from the very beginning. Made a small sound of distress. Robert's jaw tightened. Thomas continued, the words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. It started in college. I was stressed and someone gave me pills to help me focus. Then I needed pills to sleep. Then more pills to wake up. It spiraled out of control. I've been taking massive amounts of over-the-counter and prescription medications for 9 years. That's what's making me sick. Not some rare disease, just drugs, so many drugs. The room was silent except for Thomas's crying. Stared at her son as if she had never seen him before. Robert's face had turned red and could see he was struggling to control his emotions. Thomas couldn't look at his mother. I tried to stop. So many times I tried, but I couldn't. And the longer I waited to tell you, the harder it became. How could I admit that everything you'd done, all the worry, all the money, all the searching for answers, it was all because of something I was doing to myself? Robert Anderson finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? Your mother gave up her career to take care of you. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars flying you to specialists all over the world. We've been terrified, absolutely terrified, that we were going to lose you. And this whole time you were lying to us. I wasn't trying to hurt you, Thomas sobbed. I was sick, I am sick, just not the way you thought. You're an addict, Robert said harshly. That's what you are, a drug addict who's been manipulating us for 9 years. Mr. Anderson spoke up, her voice professional but firm. With respect, that's not entirely accurate. Yes, Thomas has a drug addiction, but it's important to understand that addiction is a medical condition, not a moral failing. Your son is suffering from a disease, just not the one you thought he had. Robert turned his anger on. And who are you to tell me about my son? I'm a registered nurse with 7 years of experience, replied calmly. I've worked with many patients struggling with addiction. What Thomas has been doing to himself is extremely serious, but it's treatable. However, he can't do it alone. He needs medical help, psychological support, and most importantly, he needs his family. Had been sitting in stunned silence, but now she stood up and walked to the bed. She looked down at her son, this person she thought she knew, and could see the pain and betrayal in her eyes. But she also saw something else. Love, desperate, aching love for her child. "How much are you taking?" asked quietly. "A lot," Thomas whispered. "Dozens of pills every day, sometimes 50, 60, maybe more." His hand flew to her mouth again. "That could kill you." "I know." "Why?" His voice broke. "Why would you do this to yourself? Why would you do this to us?" Thomas finally looked up at his mother, his face ravaged by tears and shame. "I don't know. At first it was just to get through school, to perform better, to meet everyone's expectations. Then it became about getting through each day. Then each hour. I'm not doing it to hurt anyone. I'm doing it because I can't stop. Every time I try, the withdrawal is so awful that I start again. I've been trapped in this cycle for 9 years and I don't know how to break free." Watched as expression shifted. The anger and betrayal were still there, but something else was emerging. Understanding, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. She reached out and touched her son's face gently. "You're still my son," she said, tears streaming down her own face now. "I'm angry and I'm hurt and I'm shocked, but you're still my son." Thomas broke down completely and sat on the bed and pulled him into her arms. He clung to her like a child, sobbing into her shoulder. Robert stood watching, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. Could see him struggling between anger and love, between feeling betrayed and wanting to protect his child. "Mr. Anderson," said gently, "I know this is overwhelming, but your son needs help and he needs it now. This isn't about punishment or blame right now. This is about saving his life." Stepped forward with her folder of information. "I've contacted several treatment facilities that specialize in cases like Thomas's. There's a program about an hour from here that has an excellent reputation. They can provide medical supervision for the detox process, which is critical. After 9 years of high-dose abuse, stopping suddenly could be fatal. Thomas needs to be monitored by medical professionals." "You've been making phone calls about my son without our permission?" Robert asked, his voice hard. "Yes," admitted, "because every hour that passes is another hour of risk. Thomas's vital signs are concerning. His heart rate is elevated, his blood pressure is high, and based on his symptoms, his liver and kidneys are under severe stress. I understand you're angry, but please set that aside for the moment and focus on what needs to happen next." Pulled back from Thomas, holding him at arm's length. "Show me," she said show me everything you found." Led her to the boxes and bags spread around the room, walked among them slowly, picking up bottles and reading labels. Cough syrup, pain medication, diet pills, sleeping aids, laxatives, stimulants. Some brands she recognized from their own medicine cabinet. Others were things she had never heard of. The sheer volume was staggering. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of empty containers. "How did you afford all this?" asked, turning back to Thomas. "I used my credit card," Thomas admitted. "The one you gave me for emergencies, and I'd ask for cash sometimes, saying I needed it for medical supplies or copays. I'd go to different pharmacies all over the city, buying the maximum amount allowed at each one. I'd order things online. I got very good at hiding it." Robert had moved to examine the evidence as well. He picked up one of the notebooks and flipped through it. Pages and pages of Thomas's handwriting, documenting what he had taken and when. Doses, times, effects. It was meticulous, almost scientific. The notebook of someone who knew exactly what he was doing to himself but couldn't stop. "This is insane," Robert said, his voice hollow. "This is absolutely insane." "Mr. Anderson," said, "I need you to understand something. What your son has been doing is extremely dangerous, but it's also incredibly common. Prescription drug abuse is an epidemic. It affects people from all walks of life, all economic backgrounds, all education levels. Your son isn't alone in this struggle." "That doesn't make it okay," Robert shot back. "No, it doesn't," agreed. "But it does mean there are established protocols for treatment. There are doctors who specialize in this. There are programs that work. Your son can recover from this, but only if he gets the right help." had been watching, and she saw the moment when the shock began to transform into determination. She recognized that look. It was the look of a mother who had decided that no matter what, she would do whatever it took to save her child. "Tell me about these treatment programs," said Tu, wiping her tears and squaring her shoulders. "Tell me everything." Opened her folder and began explaining the options. There was an inpatient facility that offered medical detox followed by residential treatment. The program typically lasted 90 days, though it could be shorter or longer depending on the patient's needs. They had doctors, nurses, therapists, and counselors all trained in addiction medicine. They could manage the dangerous withdrawal process safely while also addressing the psychological aspects of addiction. 90 days, Thomas asked, his voice small. "I'd have to be away for 90 days. "At minimum," said honestly. "Thomas, you've been using drugs heavily for 9 years. Your body is dependent on them. Your brain has been rewired by them. Recovery isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, effort, and professional help." "What about the damage he's already done?" asked. "You mentioned liver and kidney problems. Is that permanent?" "I don't know," admitted. "That's something the doctors at the treatment facility will need to assess. Some damage from drug abuse can heal once the person stops using. Other damage might be permanent. But I can tell you this, if Thomas continues on his current path, the damage will definitely get worse. He might not survive another year like this." The weight of those words hung in the air. Looked at her son, really looked at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. She saw how thin he was, how his skin had a grayish tone, how his eyes were sunken and dull. She saw a young man who was slowly dying. "We're going to fix this," said firmly, turning to her husband. "Robert, I know you're angry, I'm angry too, but our son needs us. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we're going to help him get better." Robert was quiet for a long moment, could see the battle playing out on his face. Finally, he walked over to the bed and looked down at Thomas. "Do you want help?" he asked. "Really want it? Because if we do this, you have to commit, you have to be honest. No more lies, no more hiding. Can you do that?" Thomas nodded, tears flowing again. "I want to get better. I'm so tired of living like this. I'm so tired of being sick. I want my life back." "Then we'll do it," Robert said, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll get you into one of these programs, tomorrow if possible. But Thomas, you need to understand something. You've broken our trust. That's going to take time to rebuild. We love you, but we're also incredibly hurt and angry about what you've done." "I know," Thomas whispered. "I understand." Pulled out her phone. "I can call the intake coordinator right now. The facility I mentioned has a bed available. If you agree, we can have Thomas admitted tomorrow morning." And Robert looked at each other, having one of those wordless conversations that long-married couples can have. Finally nodded. "Do it," she said. "Call them." While stepped out to make the phone call, stayed with the family. The initial shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a complicated mixture of emotions. Sat beside Thomas on the bed, holding his hand. Robert paced the room, occasionally stopping to pick up another empty bottle, as if trying to fully comprehend the scope of what his son had been doing. "I should have known," said quietly. "I should have seen the signs. What kind of mother doesn't realize her own son is a drug addict?" "You couldn't have known, Mrs. Anderson," said gently. "Thomas was very careful to hide it. And you were looking for a disease, not addiction. You trusted your son. That's not a failure. That's being a parent." "But 9 years," said, shaking her head. 9 years of this happening right under our noses. All those doctor appointments, all those tests. Did any of them suspect? Did anyone think to test for drug abuse?" "Probably not," admitted. "Because like said, Thomas doesn't fit the stereotype of a drug addict. He's young, educated, from a wealthy family. Doctors were looking for exotic diseases, rare conditions. They never thought to look at the simplest explanation." Returned, her expression hopeful. "They can take him tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The intake coordinator said to bring comfortable clothes, any medications he's currently prescribed by a real doctor, and insurance information. They'll do a full medical evaluation when he arrives and develop a treatment plan." "What happens during the detox?" asked. "Will he be in pain?" Hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Yes, probably. Withdrawal from multiple medications, especially after years of abuse, is uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous. But he'll be monitored constantly by medical staff. They'll give him medications to help manage the symptoms and make it as safe and comfortable as possible. It won't be easy, but he won't be alone." Thomas had been quiet during all of this, but now he spoke up. "What about tonight? I haven't taken anything in hours. I'm starting to feel the withdrawal already." Checked his vital signs again. "Your heart rate is still elevated but stable. How do you feel?" "Anxious," Thomas admitted. "Shaky, nauseous, and the craving is intense. All I can think about is taking something to make these feelings go away." "Can you make it through the night?" asked. "Just one more night and then you'll be in a facility where they can help you safely." "I don't know," Thomas said honestly. "The need is so strong." "Had an idea. What if someone stays with you tonight? Your mother or father. They can keep you company, help you through the difficult moments. And it would give you all a chance to talk more, to start processing all of this together." Immediately agreed. "I'll stay. Robert, you go get some sleep. You have work tomorrow, and one of us needs to be functional to drive Thomas to the facility." "Are you sure?" Robert asked. "I'm sure," said firmly. "I'm going to sit with our son tonight, and we're going to get through this together." And prepared to leave, but before they did, stopped them. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for finding this. Thank you for caring enough about my son to investigate. If you hadn't looked under that bed, who knows how much longer this would have gone on." "I'm just glad I could help," said sincerely. "You did more than help," Robert said, speaking up for the first time in a while. "You probably saved our son's life. We owe you more than we can ever repay." "Just help him get better," said. "That's all the repayment I need." Asen left the mansion that evening, felt emotionally drained but also hopeful. The truth was finally out after 9 years of secrecy. Thomas would get the help he needed. It wouldn't be either night was long and difficult for the Anderson family. Stayed in Thomas's room, sitting in the chair beside his bed, holding his hand through the worst of the withdrawal symptoms. He sweated and shivered, his body going through hot and cold flashes. He was nauseous and restless, unable to find any comfortable position. But worst of all was the psychological torment, the overwhelming craving that made every cell in his body scream for the drugs he had been feeding it for 9 years. "I don't know if I can do this," Thomas said at around 3 in the morning, his voice desperate. "Mom, it's so hard. I just want to take something, just one pill to take the edge off." Squeezed his hand. "You can do this. Just a few more hours and then we'll get you to the treatment center where they can help you properly. You've survived 9 years of poisoning yourself. You can survive one night of feeling uncomfortable." "It's more than uncomfortable," Thomas said through gritted teeth. "It feels like I'm dying." "You're not dying," said firmly. "You're feeling what your body feels when it doesn't get the poison it's become dependent on. This is what getting better feels like at the beginning, and I know it's awful, but you have to push through." They talked through the night, really talked for the first time in years. Thomas told her everything, about how the addiction had started so innocently, just a pill to help him focus on an important exam, about how quickly it had spiraled out of control, about the shame that had kept him silent even as he watched his parents suffer, about the times he had wanted to confess but couldn't find the courage. Listened to all of it, and while the hurt and betrayal were still fresh, she began to understand. Her son hadn't set out to deceive them. He had made a mistake, gotten caught in addiction's trap, and then found himself too deep to see a way out. It didn't excuse the lies or the pain he had caused, but it did help her see him not as a villain, but as a victim of his own choices and the powerful grip of substance abuse. At 10 the next morning, Robert drove Thomas to the treatment facility. Had arrived early to help pack his belongings, and she stood with on the front steps, watching the car disappear down the driveway. Had composed herself, putting on the strong face she had perfected over 9 years of dealing with her son's illness, but could see the tears threatening to spill over. "He'll be okay," said softly. "This is the first step toward real healing." "I hope so," whispered. "I really hope so." The treatment center was exactly as had described. It was a peaceful facility set on several acres of wooded land, far from the chaos of the city. The staff was professional and kind, welcoming Thomas without judgment. They had seen hundreds of cases like his, people from all walks of life who had become trapped by addiction. To them, Thomas wasn't a wealthy young man who had wasted 9 years of his life. He was simply another patient who needed help. The first few weeks were brutal. The medical detox was carefully managed, but that didn't make it easy. Thomas's body rebelled against the absence of the drugs it had become dependent on. He experienced severe withdrawal symptoms, intense anxiety, depression, physical pain, insomnia, tremors. The medical team provided medications to ease the worst of it, but there was no way to make it completely comfortable. Detoxing from years of abuse was simply hard. But Thomas wasn't alone. He had a team of doctors monitoring his physical health, running tests to assess the damage he had done to his organs. The news was both good and bad. His liver showed signs of damage but was still functioning and might recover with time and proper care. His kidneys were stressed but not destroyed. His cardiovascular system had been affected, but again, there was hope for improvement. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that with proper treatment and complete abstinence from drugs, Thomas's body could heal significantly. The psychological part of treatment was even more challenging than the physical. Thomas met with a therapist every day, sometimes twice a day in the beginning. They worked through the layers of his addiction, trying to understand what had driven him to start using and what had kept him trapped for so long. They uncovered issues of perfectionism, fear of failure, intense pressure to succeed. Thomas had grown up as the golden child of a successful family, and the weight of expectations had been crushing. In group therapy sessions, Thomas met other people struggling with addiction. He was surprised by how diverse they were. There was a successful lawyer who had become addicted to prescription painkillers after a surgery, a former teacher who had used stimulants to keep up with the demands of her job, a veteran dealing with PTSD who had turned to multiple substances to numb his pain, a young woman who, like Thomas, had started with study drugs in college and spiraled from there. Hearing their stories, Thomas began to feel less alone. He realized that addiction didn't discriminate. It could happen to anyone, and it had nothing to do with being weak or bad. It was a medical condition that hijacked the brain's reward system, making rational decision-making nearly impossible. Understanding this didn't excuse what he had done, but it helped him begin to forgive himself, which was crucial for his recovery. And Robert visited every week during designated family therapy sessions. These sessions were difficult for everyone. The therapist helped them work through the anger, betrayal, and hurt that the revelation had caused. Robert, in particular, struggled to let go of his feelings of having been deceived. He had trouble separating his love for his son from his anger at the lies. "I just don't understand how you could watch us suffer like that," Robert said during one particularly emotional session. "We were terrified we were going to lose you. Your mother cried herself to sleep night after night. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to earn enough money to take you to the best doctors in the world, and the whole time you knew what was really wrong." "I know," Thomas said, tears streaming down his face. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to understand that I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trapped. The shame of what I was doing, combined with the physical addiction, it was like being in a prison with no way out." The family therapist helped them understand that healing their relationships would take time. Trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt overnight. But with consistent honesty, effort, and patience, it was possible. The therapist also helped and Robert understand their own roles, not in causing Thomas's addiction, but in how they might inadvertently contribute to the pressures that had led him there. Continued working for the Anderson family, and over the months that followed, she watched them slowly heal. Threw herself into learning everything she could about addiction. She attended family support groups, read books, talked to other parents who had been through similar situations. She began to see Thomas's addiction not as a personal failure or betrayal, but as an illness that had afflicted her son, just a different kind of illness than they had thought. Robert took longer to come around, but gradually, he too began to soften. He started attending the family therapy sessions more regularly, engaging more openly with the process. He read the materials the therapists provided and slowly began to understand addiction as a disease rather than a moral failing. After 60 days in the program, Thomas was moved from the intensive medical unit to the residential treatment section. He looked better physically. He had gained some weight, his color had improved, and his eyes had lost that haunted, desperate look. But more importantly, he seemed different emotionally. There was a clarity about him that hadn't been there before, a sense of purpose. "I'm not going to lie and say this has been easy," Thomas told his parents during a visit. "Some days I still struggle with cravings. My brain still sometimes tells me that taking something would make everything better. But I'm learning tools to fight those thoughts. I'm learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings instead of trying to medicate them away. And for the first time in 9 years, I feel like myself again." Reached across the table and took her son's hand. "We're so proud of you, not for being perfect, but for doing the work, for being honest, for fighting." After 90 days, Thomas completed the intensive inpatient program. But treatment didn't end there. He transitioned to an outpatient program, attending therapy sessions several times a week while living in a sober living house with other people in recovery. He got a part-time job at a bookstore, something simple that wouldn't overwhelm him while he was still early in his recovery. He started attending support group meetings regularly, connecting with others who understood the daily challenge of staying sober. The road wasn't smooth. There were setbacks and difficult days. About 6 months into his recovery, Thomas had a relapse. The stress of trying to rebuild his life, combined with running into old college friends who reminded him of who he used to be before the addiction, triggered him. He bought a bottle of pills and took several before stopping himself and calling his sponsor. The relapse was devastating, but it was also a learning experience. Thomas's treatment team helped him understand that relapse doesn't mean failure. It's often part of the recovery process. What mattered was what he did after the relapse. Did he give up and spiral back into full addiction, or did he reach out for help, learn from the experience, and recommit to his recovery? Thomas chose the latter. Watched all of this unfold from her position as the family's housekeeper. She saw the slow transformation not just in Thomas, but in the entire family. The experience had changed all of them. Became an advocate for addiction awareness, volunteering with organizations that helped families dealing with substance abuse. Robert became less rigid, more open about emotions and vulnerability. And Thomas, despite the challenges, was building a new life. 1 year after had looked under that bed and discovered the truth, the Anderson family invited her and to dinner. It was a small celebration to mark Thomas's 1 year of recovery, counting from after his relapse. Thomas had been sober for over a year, had moved back home with his parents, and had enrolled in online classes to finish his college degree, this time studying something he was truly passionate about rather than what he thought he should do. They gathered around the dining room table, the same table where countless worried conversations about Thomas's mysterious illness had taken place over the years. But tonight, the mood was different. There was laughter and hope and genuine happiness. "I want to thank you," Thomas said during dinner. "If you hadn't been curious enough to look under my bed, if you hadn't cared enough to investigate, I might not be here today. I was slowly killing myself, and nobody knew because I had become so good at hiding it." "I just did what anyone would do," said modestly. "No," Thomas insisted. "Not anyone. Most people would have minded their own business, but you cared. You saw that something was wrong and you didn't stop until you figured out what it was. You saved my life." Added, "and you were willing to help, even though it meant getting involved in something complicated and potentially losing your job. That takes courage." Raised her glass. To And for their courage and compassion, and to Thomas for his strength in facing his demons and choosing recovery every single day. They all raised their glasses, even Thomas, who was drinking sparkling water. As looked around the table at this family that had been through so much, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had come into their lives as simply a housekeeper, someone hired to clean their home. But she had become part of their story, a crucial part of their healing. Thomas still had challenges ahead. Recovery was a lifelong process, not a destination. There would be more difficult days, more temptations, more moments where he would have to choose sobriety over the easy escape that drugs offered. But he had tools now, a support system, understanding of his addiction, and most importantly, the truth was finally out in the open. The mystery illness that had plagued Thomas Anderson for 9 years had been solved, not by expensive specialists or cutting-edge medical tests, but by a housekeeper who noticed a strange smell and cared enough to investigate. Sometimes the answers we seek aren't hidden in complex diagnoses or rare diseases. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, under a bed, waiting for someone to look. Continued working for the Anderson family, but her role had evolved. She was no longer just the housekeeper. She was a trusted friend, someone who had seen them at their worst and stood by them. She had witnessed their pain and their healing, and she felt honored to have played a part in their journey. On quiet days, when she was cleaning Thomas's room, now free of hidden drugs and full of college textbooks and architectural drawings, would sometimes pause and remember that day when she had first smelled something strange. She thought about how close Thomas had come to death, how his addiction might have remained hidden until it killed him. She thought about the importance of trusting your instincts, of caring enough about other people to get involved even when it's uncomfortable. The Anderson family's story became something shared with her own children, and though she changed the names to protect their privacy, she used it as a teaching moment about compassion, about looking beyond surface appearances, about understanding that addiction is a disease that can affect anyone. She wanted people to know that sometimes the people who seem to have everything together are struggling in ways nobody can see. Thomas eventually completed his degree and started working for his mother's old architecture firm, which had been kept running by her partners during her years of caring for him. He was good at his work, creative and dedicated. He also began speaking at schools and community centers about his experience with addiction, hoping to prevent other young people from making the same mistakes he had made. His message was always the same: addiction doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone, regardless of intelligence, wealth, or family background. The key is to seek help early before it spirals out of control. And if you're already caught in addiction's grip, know that recovery is possible. It's hard, it requires work and honesty and support, but it's possible. Often attended these speaking engagements with her son, sharing her perspective as a parent who had been deceived, but who chose love and understanding over judgment. She talked about the importance of family support in recovery and encouraged other parents to educate themselves about addiction rather than seeing it as a moral failing. Robert took longer to speak publicly about their experience, but eventually, he too shared his story. He talked about the anger and betrayal he had felt and how he had to learn to separate the disease of addiction from his son's character. He encouraged other families not to give up, even when recovery seemed impossible. The medical community became interested in Thomas's case. It was featured, with the family's permission and with identifying details changed, in medical journals and addiction research. Doctors were fascinated by how Thomas had managed to hide such severe abuse for so long and by how the symptoms of his addiction had mimicked various diseases. The case became a teaching tool, reminding doctors to consider addiction in their differential diagnoses, even in patients who don't fit the typical profile. Watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. She had simply done what felt right, what her instincts and her heart had told her to do. She hadn't set out to save anyone's life or uncover a years-long secret. She had just noticed something was wrong and followed through. But that simple act of caring, of paying attention, of not looking the other way, had changed everything for the Anderson family. Years later, when retired from housekeeping, the Anderson family threw her a party. Thomas, now several years sober and thriving in his career, stood up to give a speech. He talked about the day had found his hidden stash, about his terror when she discovered his secret, about his gratitude that she had cared enough to help rather than simply reporting him or walking away. "Gave me my life back," Thomas said, his voice strong and clear. "Not just by discovering my secret, but by handling it with compassion. She could have judged me, condemned me, but instead she helped me. She saw me as a person who needed help, not as a bad person who deserved punishment. That compassion was just as important as the discovery itself." Stood, tears in her eyes, as the room applauded. She hugged Thomas, this young man who had been so sick and lost when she first met him, now healthy and whole. She hugged Robert, who had been desperate and exhausted, now peaceful and hopeful. She thought about how one moment of curiosity, one decision to look under a bed, had led to all of this healing. The story of Thomas Anderson and his 9-year mystery illness taught everyone involved important lessons. For Thomas, it was about the importance of honesty and asking for help before things spiral out of control. For his parents, it was about looking beyond shame and judgment to offer love and support. For the medical community, it was a reminder to consider all possibilities in diagnosis, including those that might seem unlikely. But for the lesson was simple: pay attention, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the impact one person can have by simply caring. She had walked into the Anderson mansion expecting just to clean rooms and earn a paycheck. Instead, she had helped save a life, restore a family, and prove that sometimes the most important medical discoveries don't happen in laboratories or hospitals. Sometimes they happen because someone cares enough to look under the bed, and there was a long road ahead, but at least now they knew what they were fighting. They weren't battling an unknown disease anymore. They were fighting addiction, and addiction could be treated. "All those doctors," whispered. "All those tests, all that money, all these years, you knew the whole time what was wrong, and you let us believe you were dying of some unknown illness." Dudi would change everything. After 9 years of suffering, 9 years of expensive medical consultations and failed treatments, the answer to Thomas Anderson's mysterious illness had been hiding in the last place anyone thought to look, right under his nose the entire time.